Hello again, everyone. Tonight's story follows Marin, a weary human healer, Draka, a wounded orc mother, and Ruck, the boy who asks for a new dad in the rain. In a harsh border town, one bowl of broth, one brave no, and one open door begin turning fear into family without making love feel like debt.
Marenvale stopped at the Red Ford way station because the rain had turned the border road into a brown wound, and his mule had begun to favor her left hind foot. There were other reasons a person stopped at Red Ford, but none of them were hopeful. The town sat low between two hills, with a toll gate at one end and a cemetery at the other, a place built for people who did not wish to stay and could not yet leave. Under the stable overhang, while rain struck the roof hard enough to shake dust from the beams, Maren held the mule's hoof between his knees and cleaned packed shale from the groove beside the frog. He had been a border medic for 13 years before he became a travelling apothecary, bone setter, farrier, and whatever else a wet village needed badly enough to pay for in onions, copper, or gratitude. The work had left him with a certain way of looking. He noticed swelling before faces, breath before words, the angle at which a body refused to put weight on pain. The mule's injury was nothing grand, a bruised sole and a stone sliver, but pain did not need to be grand to alter how a creature stood, and Maren had never been good at walking past anything that limped. He was wrapping the hoof in boiled linen when a small voice beside him said, with the plain seriousness of someone bringing a necessary fact to a counter, "Sir, can you be my new dad?" Maren did not turn at once. The rain filled the silence. Somewhere inside the inn, a man cursed at a spilled cup. The mule breathed through her nose and leaned against his shoulder. Maren eased her foot down carefully, because one did not answer a child's impossible question by dropping a hoof. And then he looked at the boy. He was an orc child, 6 or 7, green-skinned and narrow under a shirt too large for him. His hair was black, wet, cut roughly around his ears, and his small tusks had just begun to press at the corners of his mouth. He held a cloth bag by both straps. It dragged in the mud because it was too heavy, but he did not put it down. He was not crying. That was the first thing Maren noticed, and the second was worse. The boy had the dry, direct gaze of a child who had learned that crying did not change locked doors, empty purses, contracts, or men's tempers. "What's your name?" Maren asked. The boy seemed to accept this as a fair first step. "Rook. Rook," Maren said. "Where is your mother?" The boy pointed across the yard. An orc woman stood half in shadow beside the wagon shed, one shoulder against a post, as if it were the only part of the town that would support her without claiming credit. She was tall, broad-shouldered, built for carrying and enduring, with black braids tight against her skull and amber eyes fixed on Maren. Her lower lip was split, her left cheek was swollen beneath the eye. 4 finger-shaped bruises marked one side of her jaw before blurring into a purple wash, and on her neck, partly hidden by her cloak, a thumb-shaped contusion sat over the pulse. Maren's trained eye catalogued the damage before anger could make it clumsy. Left-sided impact, restraint marks at least 3 days old, possible cracked ribs from the way she held herself, swollen right wrist, no obvious skull fracture, exhaustion advanced enough to make standing an act of temper. Naming the wounds did not make her smaller. It gave witness to what someone had done and what she had survived. Her hands told a different story than her face. They were large and square-palmed, scarred across the knuckles, calloused at the base of the fingers, nails cut blunt, a healing burn pale along one thumb. Capable hands, hands that had lifted a sleeping boy, tightened straps, cut wood, kneaded dough, held the world back longer than the world deserved. One gripped her cloak at her throat. The other hovered where Rook should have been, fingers flexing once before she forced them still. She met Maren's eyes. Her expression did not ask for rescue. It said, "I know what this looks like. I know what you will do. You will understand enough to be uncomfortable, and then you will walk away." They always walk away. Maren dried his hands on a rag. "Rook," he said, I don't know how to answer that standing in the rain. The boy thought about it. You can answer under a roof. It was not a joke. Maren looked at the woman, careful not to raise his voice as if summoning livestock. I have a stove in my wagon, broth, bread, dry canvas, and a bench near the door. I can look at injuries if asked. If not asked, I won't. Her eyes narrowed. We didn't ask for a healer. Her voice was rough, low, and exact. No, Maren said. He asked for something else. The silence after that was a solid thing. Rook did not look away from him. The woman did not look away from her son. Maren had seen men decide whether to cut off a limb with less strain in their faces. At last she pushed herself from the post. Her first step was too measured. Rib, Maren thought, and kept the word behind his teeth. Food first, she said. No touching him. Agreed. No questions. The stew may ask one or two. It has been lonely. Rook blinked, unsure whether humour was useful. The woman did not smile. She crossed the yard with a stiffness that said her body had spent everything to get here and resented being asked for more. When Rook offered his hand, she took it, not clinging, only enclosing. Maren led them to his wagon, a square-bodied rig with a faded mortar painted on one side. Inside were strapped shelves of jars, a narrow stove, 2 benches, a fold-down table, and the tidy loneliness of a life arranged for one. He set his stool near the door and gestured to the bench farthest from him. Sit if you want, stand if you want. Food is easier sitting. Rook climbed up with the bag between his feet. The woman stayed upright until Maren placed 2 bowls on the table and stepped back. Hunger made the decision, pride could not. She sat, one arm tight against her side. Rook looked at her before touching the spoon. She nodded once. Only then did he eat. Maren busied himself with the mule's bandage, giving them the courtesy of a turned back. When the boy's spoon scraped the bowl clean, Maren set bread on a cloth and slid it within reach. The woman broke it in 2 and gave Rook the larger piece without looking at it, the arithmetic so practiced it no longer required thought. Maren hated that more than the bruises. He had seen mothers do the same with turnips in famine tents. Love often revealed itself as a miscalculation made against oneself. Your name, she said, not a question, a required label for a possible danger. Maren Vale. Soft name. I didn't choose it. You keep it. It keeps appearing on permits. Rook chewed and said, My mother is Draka. The woman closed her eyes for one breath, as if another choice had been taken from her. Rook, he asked. I didn't, Maren said. He answered anyway. Draka opened her eyes. Up close, the amber was brighter, full of pain and a fury packed so tightly it had become discipline. Then forget it. I won't use it unless you do. She looked at him as if promises were only debts spoken prettily. He accepted that. Most healing began with what the patient believed would harm them. Quick note before we continue. If you want hotter and uncensored orc-bound fantasy romance stories, I'll be sharing them on my Patreon page. These are the deeper and more intense scenes I can't post here, so check the description for details. After the bowls were empty, Ruck fell asleep sitting upright, chin dipping and jerking back twice, because even sleep had become a duty he feared failing. Draka set a hand on the back of his neck, fingers spreading gently over the narrow bones, and he stopped fighting at once. Maren held out a blanket without stepping close. She reached for it and winced when her swollen wrist turned. He looked away before she could punish herself for revealing pain. I can bind that, he said, or you can watch it swell. It has swollen before. Then it knows the road. Rook leaned against her side. There were choices a proud person would never make for herself, and would make instantly for a child. No drafts, she said. I stay awake. I wasn't offering any. No cutting. No need. No pity. He lifted a roll of linen. Only pressure and alignment. She studied him until the stove clicked. Then she extended her hand. Maren did not take it. May I? Something flickered across her face, almost disbelief, as if consent in that plain shape were an old language she had not heard in years. "You asked?" "I asked once. This is the part with touching." Her eyes held his. Then she nodded. He set her forearm on a folded cloth and examined by sight first. Her hands, close now, were even more eloquent. Thickened fingers from rope and axe haft, a half-moon scar near the thumb, dried mud beneath one nail, old white cuts across the knuckles. The wrist was badly sprained but not broken. Restraint bruises circled both forearms. He wrapped the wrist in figure eights, firm enough to support, loose enough not to numb. "You're angry," she said. "The stove smokes when rain comes east." "Not at the stove." He tucked the bandage end. "Anger is not useful unless it can lift something. Men say that when they are waiting for the right time." "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes they have cleaned too many wounds made by anger that thought it was useful." She stared at him. He had not meant to say that much. Words like blood leaked when seams were tired. "Who taught you wounds?" "Border wars, fever camps, roads like this." "You don't carry a sword." "I carried stretchers." Something shifted in her face, not trust, but recognition of a different battlefield. She took back her hand. "We leave when the rain breaks. Then you'll want dry stockings by morning. We have feet. Feet blister. Blisters in soaked children become fever." Her mouth tightened. "You use him well." Maren looked at the sleeping boy. "No, I use what matters." That night, Maren slept on the floor by the stove, with his coat under his head, and the wagon door unlatched from the inside, visible to her. He did not say she was safe. Safe was not a word a stranger had the right to put in another person's mouth. Draka sat awake against the wall with Rook under her arm, the bag under her knees, her eyes on the door. Once before dawn, Maren woke to find her standing over him, not threatening, only looking down as if trying to understand why the trap had not closed. When their eyes met, she stepped back. The latch stuck. It had not. "Wood swells in rain," he murmured, and closed his eyes again. By morning, the road had vanished under floodwater. The bridge groaned with branches caught against its stones, and the toll-keeper announced that no cart would cross before the river fell, with the solemnity of a man who had discovered water and intended to tax it. Draka received the news with her bag already packed, and Rook's hand in hers. She looked at the road as if will might lower it. Rook looked at Maren. "Can mules swim?" "Badly with wagons." "Can orcs?" "Better than mules." "Can humans?" "Only when too frightened to sink." Rook nodded. "Then we wait." Draka's fingers tightened. "Until noon." Noon brought more rain. Redford became a held breath. Maren treated a carter's infected thumb, a stable boy's burn, and an old woman's cough, while Rook stood beside him with the solemn authority of a self-appointed assistant. When the carter jerked during the lancing, Rook said, "Don't move." He said, "Don't move." The carter obeyed, startled into stillness by the disappointment of a child. Later, in the wagon, Rook sorted corks by size without being asked. "You don't have to do that." Maren said, "I know." "Then why?" "You need them. This one fits, that one leaks. Leaking wastes things." There were adults Maren had worked beside for months who had not understood that quickly. "Who taught you leaks?" "Mother. Also roofs." Rain dripped through a seam near the stove. Maren set a cup beneath it. Rook watched him. "You didn't say no." "To the corks?" "To being my new dad." The question returned softer, and therefore heavier. Maren set down the pestle. "Rook, you didn't say yes either." "No." "Why?" "Because a father was not a coat a stranger put on in weather. Because hope could harm when given before it had bone. Because the room inside Maren, where family might have lived, had been used for bandages, maps, and inventory so long he did not know its shape. He said only, "Some answers need more than one day." Rook accepted this like a contract clause. "How many days?" "I don't know." 3. Mother kept our bag packed for 3 days after Harl's mill. Then she unpacked the pot because I was hungry. Marin felt the words enter him like a needle, seeking a vein. Is the bag packed now? Yes. Rook pressed a cork into a vial. Packed bags make doors easier. Your mother is right. Do you have a packed bag? Marin looked at the strapped shelves, the bedroll, the tools in loops, the life that could vanish from a place in 10 minutes. I think I may be one. Rook frowned. Bags don't fix hooves. This one does. The boy nodded, satisfied. That was the first lesson he taught Marin without knowing it. A child trained to notice exits could still make room for absurdity, and perhaps that was a repair no salve could teach. For 3 days, Draka kept the bag under the bench with the straps facing the door. She slept, when sleep took her, facing the entrance. She did not use Marin's name. He did not use hers. On the second evening, smoke caught in Marin's lungs while he hung herbs above the stove. He coughed until his eyes watered. When he straightened, a cup of water sat on the table. Draka was mending the torn strap of Rook's bag with a bone needle, her face turned away. Her hands moved with efficient force, the left holding leather steady despite the bandage, the right driving the needle through hide. Those hands were not ornamental, not courtly, not soft. They were beautiful the way a well-fitted handle was beautiful, the way hinges were beautiful when they had carried weight for years without failing. Marin drank. Thank you. You were loud. I'll cough quietly. Drink before you try. It was her first unprompted care toward him, so practical and deniable that he knew better than to make it precious aloud. But something in the wagon altered. Not trust. Trust was too soft and too easily claimed. It was more like a load shifted 1 finger's width and did not crack the beam. The next morning, while Draka washed inside the barred wagon, Marin took Rook to the stable to check the mule. He showed him where to stand, how to lift a hoof, how to feel heat in the wall. Animals tell the truth with their weight. Marin said, people don't. People try not to. Mother puts more weight on her left foot when her side hurts. She thinks I don't see. Mothers hope children can be children. Rook scratched the mule's jaw. I am. I can be that and see. Marin had no answer. The stable smelled of hay and animal breath, rain ticking from the eaves. He understood then that Rook had not become an adult. He was still a child, entirely, but with an adult's portion strapped badly to his small frame. Bad healing came from splinting a limb as if it were broken in only one direction. You're right, Marin said. I forget. Adults forget many things. We do. You forgot to eat yesterday. I was working. Mother says that is an excuse people use when nobody tells them to stop. Marin looked at him. Your mother says accurate things. Rook smiled briefly, and it changed his face so completely, Marin had to look down at the hoof. The second lesson was there. Care did not stop being care because it sounded like accusation. On the 5th day, Draka unpacked the pot. She set it on the stove beside Marin's kettle and filled it with barley, onion, and smoked goat from the inn kitchen. She said nothing. Marin said nothing. Rook said, the bag is lighter now. Draka gave him a look. So is my patience. Did you unpack because Marin is not bad? The spoon stopped once against the pot. It was the first time the boy spoke Marin's name. Draka's eyes flicked to Marin, then away. I unpacked because barley spills. It was wrapped. Not well. Rook accepted this lie with unusual generosity and stole a piece of onion. That night, Draka allowed Marin to bind her ribs. She sat on the bench in her shift with the cloak over one shoulder, jaw set, eyes fixed on the wall. Marin warmed his hands by the stove first. The bruising along her side was a broad, ugly wash from beneath the arm to the lower ribs, green-yellow at the edges, purple at the center. 2 ribs likely cracked, not displaced. He wrapped the linen around her with clinical care, gaze only where it needed to be. Anger banked low inside him. He gave it work, even pressure, room for breath, not where she could reach it. "Someone will come," she said. "For you? For the debt. Yours, his, Rook's father." Her head turned. "Dead. I'm sorry. He was kind. Kind men die. Useful men collect what kind men leave." She drew the cloak closer. "I signed after. Grain for service, roof for obedience, protection for the right to decide when protection ended." "With whom?" Silence. Then, "Karg Drun, tollmaster of Ashgate, clan hand for 3 valleys. He calls himself uncle to half the roads and master to the rest." Maren knew the name, the way one knew bad weather beyond a ridge. Karg controlled wintergrain, tolls, hiring rights, and enough clerks to make cruelty look administrative. Registered bond? Witnessed. Sealed. I worked 4 years. The debt grew. Grain had interest, roof had interest, medicine had interest. Breathing near his hearth may have interest now. Why leave now? Her eyes moved to Rook, asleep beneath 2 blankets. He said Rook was old enough to foster in the toll house. Boys need shaping. My husband had no brother living. Karg named himself guardian by debt right. She swallowed nothing, because she would not let it show. I told him no. Maren did not ask what happened after. Her bruises had already testified. You left. I left. In those 2 words stood the mountain she had moved with no witness. Then we planned for someone coming. She looked at him. We? Not hope. Challenge. If you allow it. You think allowance saves you from cost? No. You think standing near me is standing with me? No. Then why? He could have said because your son asked a question I have not stopped hearing. Instead he said, because you made the hardest cut. Someone should hold the edges while it heals. Her eyes changed, not softened, changed the way a wound changes when clean water first runs through it and proves there is more pain but less poison. That is a healer's answer. It's the only kind I have. She looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time by choice, she said, Maren. His name in her mouth was rough, tested, almost reluctant. It struck harder than tenderness. If this costs you, she said, I will not owe you. Good. Debts are how cages learn to speak. Then don't make one. The silence after that had texture and duration. Rook slept on, one hand curled by his face. Outside, the rain finally thinned. The bridge opened the next morning, but Draka did not leave. She stood at the road with her lighter bag and watched the first carts cross. Maren gave information because information was not pressure. South Road has fewer tolls, longer by 2 days. West has patrol stations and more questions. North takes you too close to Ashgate. You map escape well. I map fever, flood, and magistrates. Same skill, different sickness. Which would you take? If alone, south. If not alone, west. Questions can be answered. Tollmen can't be reasoned with when they think the road belongs to them. He will expect west. Then we don't go today. Delay is danger. So is movement while watched. Her mouth tightened. You think we are watched. I think a woman bound to Karg Drun arrived bruised in a border town with a child asking strangers for fathers. Someone has sold that story already. It was the first time she saw his anger plainly, not because he displayed it, but because he failed to hide the edge. She studied it as another tool she did not yet trust him to handle. Do not make me the reason you become stupid. I've been stupid for my own reasons. This would be an improvement. Rook, floating a wood shaving in a puddle, looked up. Can dads be stupid? Draka closed her eyes. Maren said, often. Good ones. Especially good ones if they don't listen. Rook turned to his mother. He listens. There was no answer that did not reveal too much. They stayed. Maren rented the shed loft with 2 jars of wintergreen salve and moved his wagon beneath it, where the door could not be seen from the inn yard. He treated travellers, mended harness, shod a pony, and sent 2 letters by different roads. One went to a low-ford magistrate's clerk, who owed him for keeping her brother alive through lung fever. The other went to an old border captain, who had retired into stamping permits only when amused. Draka did not ask what he wrote. She watched paper the way she watched knives. Alone with Maren in the wet ditch above the ford, gathering yarrow and shepherd's purse, Rook said, "If you say yes later, do I call you Dad right away?" Maren nearly cut the plant too close to the root. "I don't know. You don't know many things. I'm discovering that. I know some. If Mother says run, I run. If someone asks where we slept, say the pig shed even if there was no pig shed. If you step on mossy stone, put your foot flat. If you hide and your nose itches, press here." He pressed the bridge of his nose. "Don't breathe loud." Lessons no child should know sat beside ordinary ones inside him. Equal weight, equal access. Who taught you the mossy stone? Mother. The hiding. Rook pulled a yarrow stem. I learned. You shouldn't have had to. He shrugged, not because it did not matter, but because blame had no practical use. I was good at it. Maren looked across the valley. Being good at something hard doesn't mean it should have been yours. Rook looked at him sharply. Do you know that? Maren thought of stretchers, fever tents, the long practice of carrying other people's worst hours without complaint, until loneliness had seemed less like absence than neatness. I'm learning, he said. Rook nodded as if progress had been accepted. That was the third lesson. Children believed adults could still learn if adults did not insult them by pretending to know everything. On the 8th day, the representative arrived in a covered cart with 2 grey horses and a legal satchel wrapped in oiled leather. He was human, small, neat and dry, despite the weather, which meant he had money enough to make discomfort land elsewhere. He gave his name to the innkeeper as Sedven, clerk and bond officer under tollmaster Karg Drun. He did not shout. He paid for coffee, wiped his boots, and asked after a green-skinned woman travelling with a male child in the mild tone of a man who understood that violence was most efficient when translated into procedure. Maren heard the name from the loft before he saw the face. Draka was below grinding barley, Rook beside her. Her hand stopped once, then resumed. Strike, turn, strike, turn. In the wagon, Maren said. Draka's eyes flashed. No, not to hide, to choose the door. She understood. She guided Rook into the wagon without haste, one hand on his shoulder. Maren went to the inn room where Sedven stood near the stove with the satchel under one arm. He had pale hair, a trimmed beard, and the bland face of a man who practiced appearing reasonable in rooms where reason belonged to whoever owned the seal. Maren Vale, he said, formerly of the Border Medical Corps, currently of bad coffee. Sed smiled. I seek Draka of the Blood Fur line, bonded worker under lawful contract to Tollmaster Karg Drun, and the minor child Rook, subject to guardianship claim by bond provision. I have witnessed they accepted shelter in your wagon. I assume you did not know the legal position. The inn quieted with the ugly appetite of people relieved not to be named by law. Maren wiped his hands on a cloth. I know a woman with cracked ribs is not fit for transport. Ashgate has facilities. Ashgate caused the injuries. That is an allegation. It is a medical assessment. Care does not annul contract. No. Assault by a bondholder voids service rights pending hearing under the Border Labour Accord, Section 19. Sed's face did not change enough for most men to notice. Maren had watched dying men hide fear from surgeons. He noticed. Old law, Sed said. Clan debt service is not imperial labour. Clan debt filed for border toll enforcement receives imperial recognition and imperial limits. Karg Drun enjoys the first. He can choke on the second. A cough near the hearth tried to hide laughter. Sed unfolded a document thick with seals. You are not party to this matter. I became party when a patient under my care was claimed by the man who likely assaulted her. You have no authority to detain her. I'm not detaining her. Ask her. Sed looked toward the yard. Marin stepped into his path without seeming to. He was not a warrior. He was only a man putting his body where procedure wished to pass. From here, he said. Sed's voice cooled. Mister. Vale. She can hear you. She can answer. You don't need proximity unless intimidation is part of your paperwork. The room held its breath. Sed turned toward the wagon. Dracker of the Blood Fur line, I carry lawful order for your return to Ashgate pending settlement of debt and review of guardianship. The canvas shifted. Draka's voice came steady from inside. I hear. Do you return voluntarily? Silence. Then, no. It was the cleanest word Marin had ever heard. Sed folded the document. Refusal will be recorded. Record that I walked out breathing, she said. He did not give me that. I kept it. The sentence settled into the boards. Sed's fingers tightened. Testimony is not judgment. Correct, Marin said. That's why I sent for one. Hooves sounded outside. Captain Elian Tor, retired in title and not in posture, entered with a travel cloak dark from mist, and a magistrate's temporary seal pinned crookedly to his chest. Behind him came Lesser Wren, clerk of Lowford Magistracy, ink on her fingers, and no patience in her face. Vale, the captain said. Your handwriting remains an insult. You came fast. Your letter said a child was involved. I dislike being old, not useless. Lesser looked at Sed. Bond Officer Venn. Redford sits under Lowford emergency circuit during flood closure. Any bond recovery crossing this way requires countersignature. You know that. Sed bowed too late. Ashgate authority applies. Ashgate authority ends where my ink begins. She held out a hand to Marin. Certification. He gave her the papers. Observed injuries, estimated age, functional limits, patient consent, witness statements from the stablemaster, tollkeeper, and cook. Lesser read. Her face did not change until she reached the restraint marks. Then her mouth became a line. She called Draka out for confirmation of identity and voluntary statement, allowing her to choose her distance. Draka stepped down from the wagon with Rook behind her, one hand on his shoulder. Her hair was braided, her bound wrist visible, her bruises fading into colours that looked almost painted in their wrongness. Her hands rested on Rook's shoulders, broad, scarred, and steady. Not hiding. Holding. Sed looked at the boy. Rook, son of Darvuk, you are required to return under guardian protection. Rook stepped a little in front of his mother's leg. No. Sed smiled gently. Children cannot refuse lawful guardians. I'm not refusing, Rook said. I'm telling. Lesser's eyes softened for a fraction, then became official again. She questioned Draka in the yard. Not private enough for Sed to twist, not public enough to make spectacle. Draka answered in stones. Grain after Darvuk died, winter work, interest added, Rook assigned chores beyond age, Karg's hand on Rook's shoulder, her refusal, the locked storehouse, the strike, the second strike, the night she left. She did not dramatize. She built a wall of facts and stood behind it. When Lesser asked Rook if he wished to speak, he looked at his mother. Draka's fingers tightened once, then loosened. Only if you choose. Rook looked at Sed. He said if I was good, Mother could visit me after lessons. Who said this? Lesser asked. Karg Drun. What did you understand? Rook frowned at the obviousness. That he was going to take me. Draka closed her eyes. Marin looked down because his anger had become too visible in his hands. He opened them slowly. Tools were safest unclenched. Lesser wrote until the scratching of her pen seemed louder than the rain had been. At last she sanded the page. Recovery denied pending full hearing. Debt collection stayed. Guardianship claim suspended. Draka of Blood Fur and her son Rook are placed under provisional protection of Red Ford Circuit until magistrate review. Ced's calm thinned. Tollmaster Drun will consider this insult. Captain Tor smiled. Tell him to do it from the far side of a hearing table. Ced turned to Maren. You collect dangerous causes, mister. Vale. I prefer simple ones. A woman said no. A child was frightened. A man didn't listen. Simple causes become expensive. Send the bill to the bridge. Everything else passes through there. Ced left before sundown, not defeated but delayed. And delay mattered. Nobody cheered. Real relief did not behave like tavern songs. It entered the body unevenly, leaving some muscles braced because they had forgotten the order to release. That evening Rook ate half a bowl of stew and fell asleep with the spoon in his hand. Maren took it gently before it spilled. Draka watched him. The protective order lay on the table between them like a tool neither knew where to store. You sent letters before I told you his name, she said. I sent one asking who held emergency jurisdiction, the second asking a friend to hurry if a bond officer appeared. You assumed. I prepared. For cost? For options? She sat carefully. Without danger holding her upright, exhaustion found every place it was owed. Her hand went to Rook's back, and he settled without waking. Men used to be angry for me in rooms, she said. Outside the room they wanted payment for it. I'm not them. No. The word came slowly, reluctantly, and because of that it struck with force. You are not. She looked at the sleeping boy. His father died before memory. Darvok held him once, maybe twice, with fever in his lungs and joy on his stupid face. Rook knows him from a bead, a song, and what I tell him. He was not asking you to replace a man. He was asking for a shape he has only seen from the outside. Her mouth held itself still and failed. That is worse. Maren sat with it. I didn't answer because I was afraid to harm him with hope I hadn't earned. I know. And because I don't know how to be a father. Draka's hand moved slowly on Rook's back. No one knows before the child begins teaching. She looked away as if she had said nothing important. Rook teaches plainly. Rook teaches without mercy. A faint smile touched her mouth and vanished. It was enough to alter the room. Maren wanted, with sudden frightening simplicity, mornings in which that almost smile returned for no urgent reason. He did not speak it. To speak too soon would be to press on new tissue and call the flinch refusal. The hearing took 12 days. Karg Drun arrived in person, and Red Ford became smaller around him. He was an orc in his 50s, heavy through the chest, tusks capped in iron, beard braided with silver det rings that clicked when he turned his head. He wore no armor. Men moved aside anyway. He looked at Draka as one might look at a tool misplaced by a servant. Not rage, possession offended by inconvenience. Rook stood beside her holding a bone bead that had belonged to Darvok. Maren stood on her other side, not in front. She had chosen the placement. Karg's advocate spoke of contracts, grain ledgers, winter mercy, social order, and the danger of boys raised without proper male authority. Maren heard sickness hidden under formal language. Infected tissue often looked clean until pressure brought up poison. Lesser presided under emergency authority with Captain Tor as witness. She let the advocate speak until he mistook patience for permission, then asked for the original ledger. That was where Maren's work mattered. For 3 nights he had helped Draka reconstruct payments in kind. Hides cured, grain hauled, toll shifts worked, roof beams repaired, winter salve brewed and sold under Karg's mark. Draka remembered quantities the way survival remembered insult. Rook remembered dates by weather and meals. Maren translated memory into columns because systems that ignored pain sometimes had to be made to choke on arithmetic. Karg produced his ledger, neat and sealed. Lesser compared it with theirs, and found omissions large enough to stand in. Labor uncredited, medicine charged twice, interest applied after repayment. Roof repair listed as debt instead of service. Karg's face darkened slowly. A grieving widow misremembers. Draka's hands lay flat on the table. Maren saw the tendons tighten. Those hands could have closed around Karg's throat. Instead, they held still on paper, more powerful for it. I remember the beam in your south storehouse because it fell on my shoulder, she said. I remember 20 sacks because Rook had fever, and I counted them to stay upright. I remember what I paid. You remember what you could take. Karg looked at Rook. The boy needs discipline. Rook did not hide. I have mother. A woman running from lawful duty is not enough. Maren placed the medical certification on the table. Bruises mapped, dates estimated, restraint marks noted. His profession entered the room not as sentiment, but evidence. A guardian who uses force to secure a child from his surviving parent is not discipline, it is risk. Karg sneered. The human thinks himself clan law. No, Maren said. I think a cracked rib sounds the same in every language. Witnesses followed. The stablemaster confirmed the bruises. The tollkeeper confirmed the flood delay. The inn cook confirmed Rook's first question, repeating it awkwardly. He said, Sir, can you be my new dad? Plain as ordering oats. The words changed in the storehouse. In the rain, they had been ignition. At the midpoint, they had been a child's patient inquiry into possibility. Under law, they became evidence of a vacancy so obvious even adults trained to avoid it had to feel the draft. Draka's face went still. Maren kept his eyes on the table because he would not make her endure being watched in that pain. Lesser wrote the sentence down. Karg's advocate objected. Captain Tor said, Sit down. And the objection discovered somewhere else to be. The ruling did not free Draka in a single glorious stroke. Law preferred paperwork with teeth only half filed. But Lesser reduced the debt to a sum already satisfied by uncredited labor, voided Karg's guardianship claim for coercive conduct, transferred any remaining dispute to Low Ford away from Ashgate Authority, and entered the injury certification for inquiry into assault. Karg listened without moving, only the rings in his beard clicking. When it was done, he looked at Draka. You will regret teaching the boy that roads open when women run. Draka stood. Her hands were steady. No, I will regret that I waited as long as I did. Karg's gaze shifted to Maren. And you, Hoofmender. He will not be yours because you fed him soup. There were many satisfying and useless answers. Maren chose the one that belonged to the work. Children are not awarded for services rendered. Rook slipped his hand into Draka's. Then, after a breath, he reached with the other and took 2 of Maren's fingers. The grip was warm and absolute. Karg saw it. So did everyone. No declaration could have been louder. Karg left Red Ford under watch escort, not harmless, but diminished in the only way men like him feared. Publicly measured, publicly refused, publicly denied the child he had treated as future property. The road did not become safe. Draka did not become suddenly unafraid. That would have been a lie for people who liked wounds only after they scabbed. But the danger had edges now. Names, procedures, witnesses, allies. A beast seen in daylight could still bite, but it no longer owned the dark. In the days after, Maren prepared to leave because he had always left when the work was done. He repaired the wagon hinge, restocked comfrey, traded for dried apples, and rewrapped the mule's hoof, though it no longer needed it. Draka watched him from the doorway with an unreadable expression. Her bag remained under the bench, but the pot stayed on the stove. Rook said nothing for half a day, then began placing Maren's tools in wrong loops so he would have to stay longer to correct them. The awl does not go with bottles. Maren said, It might get lonely. Awls are solitary by nature. How do you know? They are sharp. Rook looked at him. Are you leaving? There it was. No metaphor. No softened road. Maren knelt by the tool chest. I don't know. Rook's face closed in a way Maren hated because He recognized the craft of it, a child making an inner door before someone else shut the outer one. You said answers need more than one day. I did. It has been more. Yes. Draka stood very still at the wagon door. Maren could feel the cost of every possible word. I have lived on roads a long time, he said. That can make a man confuse leaving with being useful. I am trying not to be stupid. Good dads listen. Rook said. You told me. Maren's breath left slowly. I did. Then listen now. I don't need a new dad who owns doors. I need one who stays on our side of them. The rasp in Maren's hand blurred. Not from tears, he would have claimed, but from the sudden recalibration of the room around a truth too plain to evade. Draka made a small sound behind him. Not breath, not hurt. Something in between. Maren set the rasp down. Rook. Yes. I would like to stay on your side of the door if your mother allows it, and if you still want me there when wanting becomes ordinary and I am less interesting. Rook stared. You fix hooves, you won't be less interesting. A generous assessment. Is that yes? Maren looked at Draka. One hand rested on the doorframe, not gripping. The bruises on her face had faded to shadows. The scar at her lip would remain, a small pale interruption. Her amber eyes were wet and furious about it. It is not mine alone to answer. Rook turned to her. Draka's gaze stayed on Maren. You would stay, she said, not to keep you. I know. The words were quiet, astonishing. Not to collect. Never. Not because a child asked and you are too kind to survive disappointing him. That one found him. He answered carefully. Because he asked, and because I heard him, and because somewhere between the first bowl of broth and today, the room I carry with me stopped being arranged for one. She crossed the wagon and picked up the rasp from the floor, setting it in the correct loop. Her hands were close to his, scarred, blunt-nailed, dry from lie, the wrist still faintly marked where the bandage had been. She did not take his hand. Instead, she pressed the rasp's handle into his palm and closed his fingers around it. An object passed between two people in an ordinary room. No audience except Rook, who had gone still enough to pretend not to watch. The gesture contained no vow and every beginning. Then fix the hinge properly, Draka said. It sticks in rain. Maren looked at the door, then at her. Wood swells in rain. So you said when I lied badly. You did. I may lie badly again. Then I'll pretend badly again. The corner of her mouth moved. This time it stayed long enough to be called a smile by a brave man, and Maren was brave in specific, inconvenient ways. Rook exhaled as if he had been holding his breath for years. So he is? Draka crouched slowly, because her ribs still complained in weather, and set both hands on Rook's shoulders. He is Maren. He is here. We will learn the rest without making it a cage. Rook measured whether this met the original terms. Can I call him Maren when I'm mad and Dad when I need something? Maren choked. Draka's smile deepened by a thread. That seems honest. Can I call him Dad when I don't need something? The silence opened gently. Draka looked at Maren, giving him room to choose. Yes, he said. Small. Enough. Rook nodded, absolute, as the day he had first decided, and flung himself into Maren with the full force of a child who had been economical with wanting for too long. Maren caught him awkwardly, one knee hitting the floor, the rasp trapped between them. Rook's arms locked around his neck. He was all bone, heat, and fierce trust. Maren held him as he would hold something injured and precious, then realized a child was not a wound and changed the hold. Firmer, less afraid. Over Rook's shoulder, Draka watched with tears in her eyes and anger at the tears in her mouth. Maren did not mention them. Families, he suspected, began partly in the mercy of what went unnamed. They remained in Red Ford through the first greening of the cemetery grass and the drying of the high road. Maren rented the cooper's room behind the stable for a month, then another. Draka found work repairing harness and mending doors, roofs, and wheels, because the town had more broken things than pride. She did not become easy, and ease was not owed. Some nights she woke with her breath sharp, and her hand searching for a knife. Some mornings the bag was packed again without explanation. Maren never unpacked it for her. He only made sure bread was wrapped beside it, and the legal papers stayed sealed in oilcloth. The first morning she unpacked it herself after such a night, she caught him noticing. "Don't." "I didn't." "You were going to." "I was going to ask if the pot needed washing." "Liar." "Badly." She looked at him. "Better." It became dangerously almost a joke. The romance did not unfold like songs. It came as a second cup placed on the table before Draka remembered she had done it, as Maren cutting carrots larger because she hated them and deserved the dignity of avoiding them honestly, as her sewing his torn cuff with black thread because "your sleeve looks like a rat escaped through it," as him standing behind her while she taught Rook to split kindling, admiring the patience in her hands as she adjusted the boy's grip. It came the day she said his name across the yard, simply because he had returned from Low Ford and she had seen him. Maren. 2 syllables, rough as stone, and every roof inside him altered. One warm night after Rook fell asleep on the rug, insisting he was not tired, Draka stood beside Maren at the table. The room smelled of wax, leather, apple peel, and summer dust. Maren sorted herbs into jars. Draka had been sharpening her knife, but had stopped. "You kept it," she said. He looked to the shallow tray beside his instruments. Wrapped in blue cloth lay one of Rook's small baby tusks, lost that afternoon in an apple, and entrusted to Maren with the command not to lose it. "He asked me to." "Necessary instruments can be stolen," she said. She picked up the bundle and placed it in his coat pocket instead of the tray. "Keep it where your body knows." Her fingers rested against his chest, one breath too long to be accidental, and not long enough to demand a name. "Draka. You use my name like a question." "I don't mean to." "Yes, you do." "Badly?" "No." Her gaze lowered to his mouth and returned to his eyes with the same courage she had used to leave Ashgate, turned inward now toward a danger no court could settle. Carefully. He held still. She had been managed enough. If she crossed this distance, it would be on her own feet. After a moment, she touched the sleeve she had mended. "This will tear again. Likely. Then bring it back." "To you?" "No," she said, and her mouth curved. "To the toll-keeper. He does fine needlework." Maren laughed quietly. The sound surprised them both. She leaned forward then, slowly, and pressed her forehead to his shoulder. It was not an embrace, not yet. It was less and more, weight given to someone who had promised not to make a debt of it. Maren raised his hand and stopped before touching her back. "May I?" She made a sound against his shoulder, impatience and grief together. "Yes, Maren." He set his palm between her shoulder blades. Simple, warm through cloth. It changed the room more than any vow would have done if spoken too soon. She exhaled in sections, as if doors inside her were opening one at a time. On the rug, Rook slept with one arm flung outward, fingers open, face soft in the lamplight in a way Maren had not seen that first day, and now saw often enough to ache with gratitude. Draka's forehead rested against him. The repaired cuff brushed her wrist. In his pocket, wrapped in blue cloth, a child's lost tusk lay against his ribs like a tiny, stubborn answer. Rook had asked him once in the rain, "Sir, can you be my new dad?" No one said the answer now. Draka's fingers tightened once in his sleeve, not to hold him there, but to be certain he was real, and Maren's hand settled over hers, careful, ordinary, staying.